together atmospheric scientists, we had to bring together meteorologists, we had to bring together sociologists. No one institution had all of that expertise. So that particular effort is a collaboration between University of Massachusetts, Colorado State, University of Oklahoma, University of Puerto Rico, and then there are 4 or 5 other sort of more minor partners involved in it. So there's a whole class of science and engineering problems where you have to collaborate to make something happen, because no one institution is going to have all of that expertise. And we've got such a powerhouse of research institutions and top-flight companies, industries in this state that. So I don't want to oversell it, so I won't. But I just think the opportunities for collaboration are really tremendous.
When we were doing research on what is the Supercomputing Center and where they are in the United States, one of the facts that I found very interesting, I think it was back in 2007, one of the computer centers had said they were the fastest, and they said that they were calculating 129 facts per second. 129 trillion facts per second. Are they getting faster and faster as technology advances?
Yeah, just like, so technology is a sort of tough question, but it's fair to say that computers have only been getting faster and faster and faster. It's something called Moore's Law that basically says that computers double in speed every 18 months, and this is held true since the 1960s when that was first postulated. So computers are absolutely getting faster and faster and faster. I want to say, I think people worry a little bit too much on how fast or how big it is, right? And I think the important thing is you need to solve a certain class of problems, you need a certain amount of computation, and you want to have that. And I don't think it's absolutely crucial to be the biggest or the fastest, although if you're close to being the biggest or fastest, it's always nice to be biggest and fastest in the world in what you're doing, so that's great. But there are hundreds of, we talked about research institutions that do HPC, there's hundreds of them in the country and around the world, and only one is the fastest, but all of them are doing interesting and useful things that can only be done in HPC. Okay, okay, because this last part is a little bit less technical and more sort of philosophical, I guess. So, sometimes when Eric first asked me this, well, what's a high-performance computing center? The answer I gave him was basically the answer you just saw. And I'd give that same answer to John also. But I guess what I want people to think about is it's not just a black box, right? It's what that black box does, the collaborations that go on in that black box, the applications that are enabled. I probably should have, going from applications to the industry involved here, and in the end, we're solving science problems, we're solving engineering problems, we're solving healthcare problems. Not me personally at all, but these are the kinds of things that people are using HPC for. So when you think about HPC, don't just think about the big black box that looks like the monolith in 2001, which it does, but think about all of the interesting science and important science and engineering that goes on, and the people that are impacted by that as well. I want to give you a slightly different take in that that's sort of focusing more on the computation itself and the applications. I want to also say that a high-performance computing center is not, again, just about boxes, but also about the sort of intellectual activities that go on around it. So we've seen the research side of it, and I wanted to just say something about education and outreach, because that is a very important component of what we're talking about in HPCC here. And it's still very much in the planning phases, right? So it's a little bit hard to say, well, we will do this or we will do that. But what I did want to tell you about a little bit was some of the activities that the partner institutions have done in terms of education and outreach surrounding information technology. Because in my book, you judge people on what they do, not what they say. And so let me just give you a couple of, so this particular slide, I want to go through each of these. These are science fair activities. This was when Kurose from Holyoke came up to UMass, our computer science department, Office of Information Technology. Here's an IT open house stick. So as it turns out, there's a lot of collaborations that have already been going on among some of the institutions in the Valley in the IT area. The Cambridge Science Fair, and here's Cisco. Actually, they run a Cisco Academy. We've had discussions about how Cisco and EMC could be involved in academies. that would be running. So I want to, if you'll allow me this, to just sort of put a couple of plugs in for our campus in particular, because I think we've got real street cred in terms of the outreach and the education. As you'll see, with partners around the table in IT education. And these are what I want to do here is not to sort of blow our horn and say, oh, look at the great things we've done, but rather to say, simply to suggest that when you bring together the academic institutions, these are the kinds of things that happen in terms of education and outreach. So the first thing I'll just talk briefly about, and I'm done, is the Commonwealth Information Technology Initiative. So these were the buzzwords for strengthening, modernizing, expanding IT education in all segments of public higher education. So this was actually something that the Board of Higher Ed started. It was then funded by foundations, industry, and the state, and also individuals. And it involved community colleges, four-year colleges, and the university system all working together. And actually, we had 25 out of the 27 institutions collaborating on this. We did programs on IT across the curriculum, faculty development, curriculum enhancement. And I was up at HPCC yesterday at a meeting, and somebody asked me, had I seen this New York Times article? Maybe everybody here had seen it except for me. But there was a wonderful story. I hadn't seen it, I have to say. There was a wonderful story here about service learning in information technology. And gee, when you get in the New York Times, that's the big time as far as I'm concerned, right? So here's Betty Lichtenstein, who I think, right, so she works at Enlace de Familias, and she was working with some students from our IT program in building databases and websites and things like that for them. And this was an example of that the New York Times was using about how IT and service learning actually work. It featured Holyoke, and I heard about it yesterday when I was working on these slides, so I thought, oh, I better put this in. I mean, it's almost too good to be true. But for me personally, I'll tell you, when I heard about this, it just made my heart, I just felt all warm and fuzzy all over, because I can, 10 years later, seeing this in the New York Times, I can sort of trace this backwards, okay? So this IT capstone course, which wonderful people are working on in collaboration with people here in Holyoke, that came about because as part of CITY, we had this thing called Information Technology across the curriculum. We gave out grants for people to take computing out of the computer science departments and move it across the curriculum. We got that because the BHE and this group of people here in 2000, now 10 years ago, provided some funding, something like that. So it was really great for me to hear this and being able to trace this back to this, back to this. The last thing I'll point out is an effort going on called CAPE, Commonwealth Alliance for Information Technology Education. This is an effort that's led at UMass in the western part of the state. It's got HPCC, State, UMass, and GCC. And it's actually a statewide program, and it's focusing in particular on underrepresentation in IT education and workforce. And so certainly HPCC and state, like I mentioned, are involved. It's funded by the National Science Foundation. It's led by Rick Adrian, who's also collaborating on GCC. So, thanks for your time. Thanks for the questions. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them or talk to anybody offline or by email or Skype.
Just one question. We talked about the nation, but in New England, will this be the premier high-performance computing center for New England?
Yes.
All the great universities in New England.
Yes. So in New England, there is